So in the first part of the interview with Raúl, we focus on waste management. But the term and the notion of recycling always came up in each question. So now we're going to focus on the second part of the interview on recycling, the future of recycling and the opportunities that we have to face nowadays, and all the companies and institutions. So Raúl, the first question is it really a really efficient system of recycling? Is it really implanted in some countries?
Well, there's actually no ultimate answer for this because recycling is a very ample concept and it depends on so many things. It depends on which waste stream we are speaking about, because it is not the same to recycle glass, for instance, or paper or plastic or even textiles. It also depends on the efficiency of the collection, because if the waste is not collected efficiently, there could be cross-contamination. Just to give you an example, if we want to recycle paper, but this paper is contaminated with food waste, this already makes it impossible to recycle the paper. So this is why collection efficiency is also very important. The different recycling technologies are also implemented. So there is no ultimate answer. Sorry for that.
No, I think that the perfect system never exists, right? Yes, we're always trying to achieve it.
Yes. In any case, I would like to mention that even before we reach the recycling or even the upcycling stage, we should make an effort in implementing the previous R's, as we mentioned before, to rethink the products that we use daily. And this goes especially to the manufacturing companies to put in place the eco-design concept, making or designing products that are easier to recycle at the end of their useful life, and also trying to avoid single-use items or disposable items, and not only those ones made of plastic, because lately plastic is being demonized, and I would like to say, or to take the opportunity to mention that plastic is not really the culprit of all this. Plastic has some very good capacities, and plastic has made our life better. So the culprit is not plastic. We shouldn't demonize plastic. What we should demonize is the single-use items, no matter if they are made of plastic or paper or even wood. No products should be made just to be used once. This is totally wrong. We have to rethink the product, we have to reuse them, we have to re-give them, not just use them sometimes just for a few seconds. For example, straw, we don't need a straw, we can drink without a straw. So that's what should be demonized, not plastic, but single-use products or disposable products. And well, coming back to your original question, and taking this into account, yes, there are new technologies, and some of them are more efficient than others. For example, the recycling of PE and PET, which are two kinds of plastics or two kinds of polymers, is fairly efficient and fairly economic. So it's being done quite a lot, and we can say it works. The recycling of paper has also been done for quite a few years already, and we can say it is good and it works. But then if we speak about other polymers or even glass, then the benefits of recycling are not so clear. Why? Because it is very expensive to do it, it is very energy efficient, so sometimes recycling is not really the answer, unless new technologies come up which make it more sustainable, cheaper. But for the moment, for example, speaking again about glass recycling, I remember when I was a small kid that when you went to a bar and you order a drink, the waiter brought a glass bottle, and the glass bottle was not new. You could just tell by looking at it. It had been reused again and again and again, and that was not a problem. But unfortunately, the drink manufacturers came up with the plastic mainly because of cost reasons, because it's cheaper. And now the reuse of glass bottles has almost disappeared. But that was something good. and we got rid of it. So sometimes it's just about going back to basics.
Exactly, yes. So, and I think when designing the perfect recycling system, it's not just going to the end part of the recycling and kind of managing this waste, but also, as you have mentioned with the 7 hours, to rethink the use, to reduce the consumption that we're nowadays kind of engaging in constantly and every day. So it's kind of going back to the basics, going like reducing waste, reducing the amount of things we buy, the amount of things we use, and kind of having taken a turn of these kind of notions and creating the perfect system.
Absolutely.
So I guess, Raúl, in each country maybe we can have different recycling systems that we're not so familiar with. So my question will be, what are the main difference for us to understand in Spain and Singapore? What are the main difference in the recycling systems that both countries have?
Okay, so well, there are a number of differences. So I'm going to name them. For instance, in Spain we have 5 different waste streams, whether here in Singapore we only have 2. At least speaking about the public waste, I'm not speaking about private companies or whatever. In Spain, well, the 5 streams are well, glass, plastic, paper, organic, and refuse. This is called segregation at source. It actually helps recycling because it avoids cross-contamination. Here in Singapore, there are only 2 fractions or waste streams, which is basically recycling and non-recycling. That means all the products which are able to be recycled are disposed together in blue bins. And this is probably not the best because there's a lot of cross-contamination. There is a lot of food waste coming in, so the food waste contaminates the plastic, the paper. So, well, that's something that could be improved here. Another difference is that, well, Spain has to follow the very strict norms and targets set by the European Union, whereas Singapore sets its own norms and targets. This can be good and bad. I mean, it is not too bad because, well, the Singapore government has really made a lot of steps forward, and it has set up some very ambitious targets in the Singapore Green Plan 2030, but not all countries are so ambitious or so strict. So in this sense, some other countries can have well, deficitary recycling ratios or procedures. Another difference is the lack of space here in Singapore if compared to Spain. In Spain, there's really no problem, or not such a big problem installing recycling stations, waste to energy plants, even landfills, which is not the best of the solutions, but there's no problem. And here in Singapore, there's only 1 landfill, which is an island, Semakau Island. So there is not really much space. There is also not a lot of space to install new waste to energy plants. So definitely space constraints are different. And last but not least, there is also a difference in climate. The high heat and humidity here in Singapore makes the leachate process of the food waste much faster, much quicker. That means everything needs to be done faster. So that's an absolute challenge that does not happen in Spain. And I would like to mention one thing to finalize with your question, which is the really wide culture of takeaway dining and hawker centers here in Singapore, which is really not comparable in Spain. In Spain, you can dine out from time to time, but not with the frequency as it happens here. And I want to say that I have nothing against it. Actually, I love hawker centers. I think it's one of the highlights here in Singapore, and everybody should visit them from time to time. But I think we could all step up and improve our procedures with this. If you're going to order for takeaway, why don't we bring our own container?
Exactly, yeah.
Or why don't we use our own cutlery? Or why don't we refuse, and we are going back to one of the R's, to use plastic straws? We can drink without plastic straws, no problem about it. And by doing this, we would be getting rid of a huge amount of single-use disposable items that are being consumed every day here in Singapore and that are a real headache for a proper recycling. So this is something that I wanted to mention.
Yes. So I see different examples like straws and also plastic bags, which here are used so frequently. Maybe in comparison with Spain, that we go to supermarket with our own bag of made of cloth or something like this. But I think that now, when we're little, we're trying to come up with ways at schools to educate people. But I think this is still some sort of misinformation, or that we lack some information. For example, listening to the first part of the interview, and now I have learned so much that I could have learned maybe at schools, or maybe our parents. We can discuss it a little bit more. So Raúl, do you perceive that there's a lack of information and a lack of education in this topic, and that it can be really, make a difference in the following years?
Yes, there's absolutely a lack of education regarding waste management, recycling, sustainability in general, and this happens everywhere. This happens in Asia, this happens in Europe, this unfortunately happens everywhere. It comes to my mind the approach of my parents regarding recycling, which is very different from mine. Probably this happens to all of us, because our parents, they were not used to recycle when they were young. However, they were used to do other procedures that were very good for sustainability. For example, reducing the products used, reusing them, repairing them, but not recycling them because there was no need to recycle. However, we are very used to dumping things, disposing things, trying to recycle, yes, but not so much to reuse these items, to repair them. So you can see that within one generation, there is a big difference between the education about sustainability. And I am sure the current kids and children, they will have a very different approach than that of ours, because this is the thing that keeps changing with the generations. Having said this, yes, there's lack of education in Asia, but there are still differences between countries. And I would like to mention that some countries in Asia are really very bright spots in terms of recycling in this case, which are Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan. And especially Japan. I would like to highlight that in Japan there is a culture of cleanliness, of recycling, of respecting the environment and Mother Nature, if you want to call it like this, that is really admirable and commendable, and we should all learn something from them. Apart from these countries, well, there are other countries in Asia that are taking steps in the right direction, and Singapore is definitely one of them, with the mentioned Singapore Green Plan 2030 and other measures by the government, but they still lag behind Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan. And then after that, well, we have a lot of countries, and I'd like to mention again, especially China, India, and Indonesia, because they are huge countries. Their populations are huge. Actually, these three countries alone account for almost half the world population. So we can imagine how hard and how difficult it is for these countries to implement efficient measures, and they're still trying to do so. And we have to commend them for them. But they still have a long way to go in this respect. And well, to finalize with this, I would like to mention, because I have mentioned China, I have mentioned India, I have mentioned Indonesia. I don't want anybody to think that I am blaming these countries. Okay, that wouldn't be fair. We have to be honest with ourselves by acknowledging that waste management is still not a priority for many people in the world, especially for developing countries, let alone poor countries, and this is totally understandable. When your priority is looking for food or very basic needs, it's totally understandable that waste management is not a priority, and it is actually a challenge for all of us to try to implement proper waste management and recycling methods in these poorer and developing countries, because otherwise recycling is going to remain a thing of a few rich countries, and it shouldn't be that way. And if it remains that way, well, we are not going to reap the benefits as a planet.
Yes, so we have to really kind of educate ourselves, but educate the whole and the global population, because there are countries that are setting an example, but of course there's so much to learn and to improve. And of course we can use one of the R's, so rethink the new ways of recycling, and of course the new generations can learn from the older ones as well and come up with a better and more efficient ideas. And I think is one of this problem with education, or the lack of it, as we have discussed, that I want to focus on the next question, because you see, when I discuss the topic of recycling with my colleagues, my friends, or the family, there's always someone who says, but does recycling really make a change? Because is it really useful? Because what I see is that we take the waste and we kind of mix it around, and then we put it in this kind of landfills. So we're trying to separate plastic, paper in Spain, for example, and organic food. But then in the end, it all comes to the same container, they all get mixed up, and they all end up in the landfill. So it was a question that I was really interested in, just to be able to have the information and the knowledge to answer to those who raise this kind of question. So Raúl, does recycling really make a change for the environment?
Well, it does, of course, it does. It does, and we all need to try to contribute to it. If you ask me about what some people say, these rumors that recycling doesn't really matter because everything gets mixed and get together afterwards, well, that's basically not true. It can happen sometimes somewhere, but well, governments, companies are really thriving for this not to happen. This is why every day more and more cities and countries are implementing the segregation at source. This means separating all the different waste streams, so it is easier for them to be recycled and even to be upcycled. But having said this, of course, recycling makes a difference, but we need 3 different parties to get together. One party is us, the general public. We need to believe in recycling. No, everything does not get mixed afterwards, so we need to try to recycle as much as possible. But it is also important, and I would say even more important, that governments and companies take it seriously. Governments need to legislate and regulate it and even encourage it, and they have the tools to encourage it. In some countries, for instance, people who recycle more, they get benefits by paying less taxes, for instance. In some other countries, which are more policing, if you want to call it this way, what they implement is penalties to people who don't recycle. Well, you can argue which way is better, but at the end of the day, the government needs to encourage recycling by taking these kind of measurements. And even more important than this, in my opinion, is that the companies producing or manufacturing the products that we all use, they need to take it really, really seriously by implementing eco-design, by launching products that are easy to recycle or to reuse or to upcycle, and definitely by getting rid of the single-use disposable items, which is really it's really plaguing our societies, and it's something that we really need to get rid of it, because the end of the day, well, we need to keep in mind that the world population is going to reach 8 billion people very soon. Some sources say this is even going to happen this year, in October or November, and this means that in 10 or 20 years, some of the materials that we have right now, they're not going to be available anymore. So we really need to think about this. If we still want to have the lives we're having, to in some sort of way, we need to start recycling and upcycling. We cannot keep a linear economy.
Exactly. So I think everyone needs to compromise and to understand that it really is a problem that can be solved, but we have to all make an effort to do that. Not only us and the individuals that recycle and kind of reuse the products, but also to press governments and companies to really rethink the ways they're using the products and the ways that the laws are now legislating. So finally, to conclude this second part of the interview, Raúl, I want to look into the new initiatives for recycling that are coming up, and though you're thinking in these companies that will be really efficient and will really make a change in the future?
Well, there are many. Some of them are very new. Some of them are not so new. Some of them work better. Some of them need some polishing. But well, I'm going to just name a few that are interesting in my opinion. So one of them is transforming waste to energy. This is already being done, but I'd like people not to think on the really huge waste to energy plants that we can see in Singapore or in Spain or in other countries, but this also can be done at a domestic level. For example, all of us could have a small biogas plant, if you want to call it like that. It's not really a plant, it's more of a small machine or a small setup. And this works by the leftovers of food waste at your home. For example, potato peels, just to give you an example, or eggshells. You just dispose them into this small biogas plant, if you want to call it like that, and you can generate biogas that you can use to cook or for heating. So this is very interesting way of everybody doing something. We just cannot leave everything in the hands of the governments or on the companies. This is why I like this example. There are already companies offering this, and we all can buy them. The prices are fairly low, and we can install them if we live in a small cottage or in a small house. It's a bit more difficult if you live in a flat, but I'm sure new things will come out to let these things happen. Another example is the construction and demolition waste, because it's fairly easy for us to think about the waste we all generate at home, the so-called domestic waste or municipal solid waste, but there are many other kinds of waste that also pose a very big threat and big problem to our societies, like industrial waste or like construction and demolition waste. Construction is a very big or huge industry everywhere in most countries, and construction generates a huge amount of waste. So it's very important for construction companies, even architectural firms, to use sustainable materials. And this means materials that can be recycled after a building, for example, the life of the building is finished, or it can be reused. And sometimes, especially traveling in Asia, I see that some materials are being used, like for example precast concrete casing, which makes it faster to make buildings, even cheaper, but it is not sustainable at all because it cannot be recycled afterwards. So this is a calling for the construction companies to also keep sustainability in mind. Another examples that I can mention, PET bottles, plastic bottles, they're being turned into sports textiles, these kind of textiles that are good for sweating, like football jerseys, for instance. So many of them are now being made out of PET bottles. It's fairly successful. Another example, which is really not new at all, but is working well, is the paper recycling. Paper is fairly easy to recycle, and it really doesn't matter too much if we use recycled paper instead of virgin paper. So this is also a very good example. I could also mention the used rubber pneumatic tires that I mentioned in the first part are now being turned into pavement for new roads, or even into children's playgrounds. So when the children fall down, they don't hurt themselves. So this is a very good example of upcycling. I would also like to mention the new technologies that are coming up for the e-waste recycling, which is the electric and electronic waste. This is very important because electronic devices like mobile phones, like laptops, like TVs, they have inside a lot of different materials. Some of these materials are very expensive, some of them are very pollutant, so it's utmost important that new recycling waste to recycle these kind of devices come up. I would like to finish up by mentioning one last recycling technology, which is turning again food waste, this time into compost, which is a very useful element for agriculture and crops. There are many different ways to recycle, but I'm just going to mention two. One is using food waste digesters. So these food waste digesters make the process much faster, much cleaner, much safer, if you want to call it. And the other one is by using a black soldier fly larvae. This black soldier fly is one kind of fly, of course, and when they are larvae, these larvae are really voracious. So they really devour the food waste very fast, and they turn it into a very high quality compost.
Wow.
So this is a very interesting technology, if you want to call it like that, but it's probably more of a biotechnology. It's very cheap, it's easy to implement it in developing countries, and there are byproducts of it because, well, these larvae, if they are dried, they can be eaten by animals or even by people, and it's a very rich source of protein.
Yeah.
So these are just a few examples of very ingenious and interesting ways of recycling.
Yes, so I think, well, those examples really highlight the two main topics that we have discussed, that the circular way of recycling, right?
Yeah,
and
circular
also
economy,
the circular economy, and also upcycling. So of course governments and of course companies really need to make an effort and change the way they're doing things. But of course we cannot leave everything to them. So as you have mentioned, Raúl, we have to start making a change ourselves. So at home, little things, but really useful ones.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much. I hope you can do a masterclass to the whole world in terms of recycling and waste management.
Well, I love this topic. Thank you very much for giving me the chance to discuss it. And if everyone hearing this is interested in further discussing or knowing more about it, feel free to contact me, and I will be happy to further discuss about it, because I think there is a need for everybody to know more about this, and in order to be able to do more.
Well, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you in the Spanish Sling.
Same for me.
And I hope it's as useful as it has been for me. So thank you so much for listening, and see you next week.